Welcome back to Carolina Journal Radio. I'm Mitch Kokai. He has served as North Carolina's Attorney General and its Secretary of State. He took part in one of the roughest campaigns for governor in North Carolina history, and he played a role in exposing the Watergate scandal. I can only be talking about Rufus Edmisten, and he discusses all of these topics and more in a new book. It's called That's Rufus, a memoir of Tar Heel politics, Watergate, and public life, and he joins us now to share part of the story. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, 1984 was a bad year. That wasn't a good year to run in as a Democrat.
No, tough year. There are many things we could talk about, but since our time is limited, let's focus on one item that is actually in the subtitle of the book, Watergate.
Yes.
Remind us, how did you get involved in all of this mess of Watergate?
Mitch, I was a staff member with Senator Sam Ervin of North Carolina from Morganton, and I always told him when I was growing up in Boone, I want to work for you someday, and so I kept pestering him to death until he allowed me to work for him. I worked on his Constitutional Rights Subcommittee and his Separation of Powers Subcommittee, and then along came this thing called Watergate, and I was thrust in the middle of it, and I was telling somebody that I was too young to have the responsibility I had. At 31 years old, you don't know anything at all much. But that is when I went to serve the subpoena on Richard Nixon. It was the first time in history that a subpoena had been served on a president by a committee of the Congress. And, of course, I was not unaware that it was a very high-loaded charged day when I went down to the White House that day. And I didn't have an entourage, but I had a fallacy of news people because they were very anxious about this because it was the first link that we knew when Mr. Nixon became involved in Watergate because of the revelation of the Butterfield Watergate tapes. And that is where it started with the Senator Ervin and Baker, who worked like a team of horses together, by the way. That's one of the lessons of Watergate. They actually worked together, unlike today. We don't have fortifications. We don't have silos. We didn't have those like we do today. And they were a fantastic team together. And Mr. Nixon, not unlike so many other presidents, he let it get the best of him. He let that old disease called hubris get him and thought that the president could do anything he wanted to do under Article 2 of the Constitution, and it didn't work. And Watergate, though, was a good example of how when you work together, things will work. And that we've been unfolding of the working together ever since Watergate. We thought that would cure a lot of things. It didn't. Watergate's come up on us day and night, and so much of it, Mitch, is occasioned by the huge amounts of money occasioned, in my opinion, by the decision Citizens United. And so Watergate is something that I would say that all administrations should look and study Watergate so they won't repeat all those mistakes, but it seems as though that's being repeated as we speak today.
You mentioned that you were working at the time for Senator Sam Ervin, who longtime North Carolinians will definitely know the name, and people following politics today know his grandson is on our state Supreme Court,
yes.
Sam Ervin IV. People at the time could have said, oh, this is just Democrats in Congress trying to get our Republican president. What did Senator Sam Ervin do, and you mentioned him working with Senator Baker, to make sure this wasn't just some partisan issue, but this was really dealing with a real problem?
He and Senator Baker made a deal in the very beginning. We will not disagree on things. Never was there a vote where there was a dissenting vote on the delivery of the subpoena or any witnesses. And also, he was very careful to have a staff that was not dogmatic. We were told time after time after time, go where the facts are and don't go off into partisan hijinks. And I'm afraid that we do that now both on the Capitol Hill and both in the executive branch. People are off on their own. Watergate also had a public aspect to it. As time went on, the public saw that things weren't just right when you had a president who the tapes revealed said, okay, let's how much will it cost to pay him off? That's a pretty good sign that something's going on real badly. That would get you 17 years in jail today. And so it was a different era, different time. a kind of comity between the parties. And actually, most people think that Richard Nixon was impeached and convicted. He was not, of course, as you well know. He left because a group of senators, Republicans, came down from Capitol Hill, Senator Barry Goldwater, Senator Hugh Scott of Pennsylvania, and others, and said, Mr. President, if you don't resign, they will impeach you, and if they impeach you, you will get convicted, and some of us will vote for conviction. So it was a different time. We were not so fortified on each side, and so venomous, and it's a totally different. A lot of the common elements run through Watergate and the goings on today, but I will admit it's purely partisan today on both sides.
We're not going to have a chance to get into all of your future public life, but in serving as Attorney General, Secretary of State, running for governor, what are some of the lessons you took from Watergate for the rest of your political career?
That sunshine is the best of all things, and I messed up one time in my career and didn't follow the lessons I'd learned in Watergate. And hubris is such a disastrous disease that when you get puffed up and blown up on your own worth, you think you're better than everybody else and nobody's going to ever catch you at anything. One time in my career as Secretary of State didn't follow those good lessons. But I've learned that if you have the public awareness of things, that it is not so bad as it can be when you try to do government in secrecy. Secrecy is the enemy of the people. The press is not the enemy of the people. Secrecy is the enemy of the people. And that's the one big thing about Watergate. We put it all out there, and I used to say that Sam Ervin was the teacher-in-chief in America of constitutional law.
All of these events took place 45 years ago or more. Are you surprised that Watergate is still as much a part of the public consciousness as it is today?
Not at all. Every time you turn around, there's a new gate attached to some kind of a wrongdoing or some kind of a sketchy subject. It is not, because it was the first time that America took part, really, in a great debate. Now, you had the McCarthy hearings, but very few people at that time had a television. And I remember, Mitch, we were getting as many as 40,000 letters a week. Now, I mean letters. I don't mean emails. I mean letters, handwritten out and postcards and telegrams. The public was involved in it. And it obviously at that time you had only 3 channels plus public television. And now, my goodness, you're so jumbled up that people's attention is focused on one of 1,400 different channels. And with the 24-hour news cycle, we don't know what's going on. It's so jumbled up.
In our few remaining moments, the lessons of Watergate, we've talked about them, the need for transparency, the need to be bipartisan. Do you think we're going to get to a political situation where we don't have gates in the future, or are we always going to have some kind of gate?
The way it's set up right now with some of my friends, I'm not condemning them, but you know them like I do. The political consultants are going to make sure that we don't get together because they won't have as much business. And I have to leave on that one because I'll be run out of town by some of my friends like Brad Crone and others. But the political consultants try to find the lowest common denominator in campaigns so that they can divide people and keep them apart. And both sides are very guilty of that. And I'm afraid we won't, because everybody now looks for their 5-second soundbite, and it's got to be tangy, critical, and it's personal most of the time, and we don't need that. We don't need this bickering between the president and the Speaker of the House. I don't particularly like that. It's unseeming, unbecoming of both of them. And it's sort of childish what happens now because of the access of too much media, and the media is being an accomplice in it because they get good sound bites.
Well, if you would like to get more than sound bites and much more about the political history of Rufus Edmisten, you'll have to read the book. It is titled That's Rufus, a memoir of Tar Heel politics, Watergate, and public life. Rufus
and bring it by the office. I'll sign it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at the bookstore up here.
That sounds good. Once again, it's That's Rufus, a memoir of Tar Heel politics, Watergate, and public life, the story of Rufus Edmisten. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great, Mitch.